At 8,000 feet, my sleep system ripped in half because of one mistake. No insulation, no shelter, and I was 10 miles from the nearest trailhead. Most backpackers fear storms, getting lost, or wild animals. But the real trip enders, they're usually tiny mistakes you don't even notice until you're freezing, soaked, or miles off route. I've made them all. Ripped shelters, clogged filters, and one miscalculation in the Grand Canyon that left me rationing half a liter of water. In this video, I'll break down 5 small screw-ups that nearly wrecked my trips and how to fix every single one before they ruin yours. All right, I was 8,000 feet up in the Sierras. The sun was setting. I was 10 miles from the nearest trailhead. I was setting up my hammock shelter for the night when my Ultralight Cloud 71 hammock brushed against a granite rock and ripped clean in half. One second I was setting up my shelter, the next I was staring at a shredded sleep system with nothing but a sit pad between me and the cold ground. I'd already been hiking all day, and the thought of turning around and hiking another 10 miles back through the dark wasn't even on the table. I was basically stuck, and I was going to have to survive the night. Now, I probably should have known that a hammock you can basically see through isn't built for abuse. But the thing is, Cloud 71 fabric is a lot stronger than it looks. I'd already taken the hammock out on a few trips and it held up just fine until I dragged it across sharp granite, like an idiot. And since I was hammock camping, my bottom insulation was an underquilt, which only works if it's suspended under you, trapping warm air. I ended up having to put it on the ground and lay on top of it, which compressed the down and caused it to basically lose all of its insulating properties. Luckily, this trip was in the summer and the overnight temps only dipped down into the 50s. It was not comfortable, but it was just warm enough to get through the night without going hypothermic. Now for my hammock camping trips, I've switched back to my regular 40D nylon hammocks, and every time I set them up, I'm a lot more careful about what's underneath me. The mistake was treating ultralight gear like regular gear without respecting the trade-off between weight and durability. So lesson learned, every ounce you shave off your pack comes with a cost, and if you ignore it, the trail will remind you fast. And speaking of the trail teaching lessons the hard way, this next one nearly wrecked a trip before it even started. So this one happened on a solo backpacking trip in the Grand Canyon. Dropping down the Hermit Trail on the south rim to the base of the canyon, then climbing back out along the Tonto Shelf. Now, this was still early in my backpacking career, and I knew the canyon could get hot, but what I didn't realize is that the base of the Grand Canyon averages 20 degrees hotter than the rim at any given moment. So when I set off from the south rim, it was a perfect 70 degrees. Cool air, light breeze, it felt amazing. So I packed my usual 1.5 liters of water, and that was a mistake. At first, the hike was feeling pretty easy. I was cruising along the first mile, jaw on the floor, just soaking in the views of the canyon, and it still felt cool for the first mile or two, so without even really thinking, I finished off one of my 2 water bottles in the first hour. But the deeper you drop, the harsher the canyon gets. Trail descends almost 5,000 feet. There's no shade, just steep, rocky single track baking in the sun. After the first hour, the temps had already hit the 90s. I still had around 4 hours to hike. No water sources until the bottom, and I now had less than a liter. I was already sweating hard, starting to get lightheaded, and that's when I realized I think I messed up. This was the Grand Canyon, a place where people die every year from heat and dehydration. Luckily, this happened on my way down the canyon, burning less energy than if I had been going uphill. That helped, but I was still skating close to real danger. Ultimately, I was able to ration carefully, reach the creek at the bottom, rehydrate, and recover overnight before the climb out. But this was a wake-up call. I knew it would be hotter at the bottom of the canyon. I just didn't understand how much 20 degrees and full exposure actually changes everything once you're in it. So the big lesson with this one, always research the full conditions for every part of your route. And when you're hiking in extreme places like the Grand Canyon, Death Valley, or other rugged area, always err on the side of caution and bring more water than you think you'll need. And unfortunately, that wasn't the last time that a water situation almost wrecked a trip. Another mistake I made and definitely paid for was getting a little too casual with my water filter. So my usual routine when I'm on a trip is to drink most of my water during the day's hike and then time it so I finish the last of my water right as I reach the next source. It works fine as long as your filter actually works. But on one trip, after a long hot day of hiking, I finished my water just as I reached my final water source to fill up before hitting camp. I grabbed my water, and when I got to camp, I hooked up my Sawyer squeeze like I always do, and it was barely dripping. It probably took 10 minutes just to collect an ounce. So as soon as I had enough clean water to backflush it, I instantly tried that, hoping it would clear the clog. But it didn't help. The filter was completely jammed. The flow wasn't improving, and it took over an hour just to filter my first liter. And after a long day hiking in the sun, having to sit there waiting for water wasn't just frustrating, it was kind of brutal. And the scary part, I was lucky my filter was even dripping at all. If it had been clogged a little bit worse, I would have been stuck without a way to treat my water. The real problem was I'd let the filter sitting dry at home for months before my trip without testing it. When you leave your filter sitting for that long, the fine particles can harden inside the membranes and air pockets form, which can drastically reduce the water flow. Usually if you just get it wet and run some water through it the day before your trip, it'll kind of clear that all up, but I completely forgot to do that. So now I always test my water filter a day before the trip. And I always carry aqua tabs now as a backup form of water purification, because even the best water systems can fail when you need them most. And sometimes it's not even the gear that fails you, it's the weather. So if you caught the full video I posted a few months ago, you might already know how sideways this one went, but here's the short version. And if you missed it, I'll link it below if you want to see the full disaster play out after this one. So I was solo backpacking in the desert in Joshua Tree National Park. Forecast called for 0% chance of rain. I even double checked it that morning on my inReach. So I figured, cool, I'll just leave half the rain fly on and sleep under the stars. Best of both worlds, right? The plan was that if I heard rain during the night, I could just pull the rest of the fly over, simple enough. But before settling in for the night, I still had to hike out and grab my water cache, because in Joshua Tree, there's basically no reliable natural water that you can collect. I figured it'd just be a quick 2-mile round trip, so I didn't even bring my rain jacket. About a mile from camp, the sky just opened up. Out of nowhere, it started dumping rain, like hard desert rain, the kind that soaks you in seconds. I was getting drenched, and all I could think about was my tent, half exposed, back at the campsite with my down quilt that I had tossed inside before I left. By the time I had sprinted back to camp, the damage was done. My tent floor was soaked, my down quilt was absolutely drenched, and it was expected to hit the low 30s that night. Suddenly, I was in a full survival situation, wringing out my gear, stuffing on every dry layer I had left, cramming calories in my mouth, doing jumping jacks to get my body temperature up, and hoping my own heat would dry out enough of the insulation to survive the night. And it worked. Barely. But that was the night I learned 3 huge lessons the hard way. First, if you're only half covering your tent, make sure your critical gear is at least under the protected side. Second, never leave camp without your rain jacket. Ever. Even for a quick trip. And third, never ever trust the weather forecast completely when you're heading into the backcountry. Even a 0% chance of rain can turn into a soak disaster really fast. And when things go sideways out there, you better have a plan to survive. And that was another mistake I made as a beginner, and one that could have gone bad fast as well. Heading into the backcountry without any real way to call for help. So on my first solo backpacking trip, I ended up about 8 miles from the trailhead, hiking along, feeling good, when out of nowhere, the thought hit me. What if I got bitten by a rattlesnake right now? Or severely twisted my ankle? Being new and way too casual about it, I had headed out without a satellite beacon, without a whistle, and once I lost cell signal, I had no way to call for help. And when you're that far out, alone, You realize real quick that if something goes wrong, nobody's coming to help you unless you make it happen. One bad fall, one snake bite, and you're stuck. Maybe for hours, maybe longer. Looking back, it was a dumb risk to take. After that trip, the first thing I did was pick up a basic signal whistle and started carrying it on every single hike. 3 short blasts, that's the universal distress signal if you ever need to get found. Eventually, I upgraded to a Garmin InReach Mini, a little satellite device with an SOS button that you can call for rescue no matter where you are. Now, whether I'm deep in the backcountry or just a few miles out, I've got both a whistle and a satellite beacon every time I hit the trail. And if these hard lessons are helping you dodge a few disasters of your own, hit the subscribe button. It'll help you catch the next breakdown before it catches you. And if you want to dodge even more mistakes before they wreck your next trip, check out my video on the top 5 beginner backpacking mistakes. It's right up here. So stay safe, guys, make good calls, and I'll see you on the next one.